Welcome to the Truth Champion Podcast with Ashley Yablon. Join us as Ashley taps into his wealth of experience as a lawyer, a leader, an educator, and an author to inform and inspire others. Listen as Ashley unpacks the real-life implications of standing for what is right against all odds, the pitfalls of blind ambition, and above all, the need to be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Ashley. I hope you're well, and welcome to everybody out there listening in to Season 1, Episode 5 of the Truth Champion podcast. Today's episode is titled, Where Has Conviction Gone? Interesting, right? You wait till we get into it. So before we kind of delve into it, Ashley and I have been speaking now for about 4 or 5 episodes. We've spoken in terms of Ashley's humble upbringing, the influence that his father had on his values, and also what it feels like to stare down, and I don't say this lightly, to stare down a global powerhouse and win. That's why we've called this podcast the Truth Champion Podcast. Ashley, how are you, my friend?
Great. Good to see you, Paul. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well indeed. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a bout of COVID, but I'm all right now. And to all our listeners out there, Happy New Year. I know that we're kind of a little bit late on that, but there we are. So there we are. Yeah. So let's dive into it. Well, I know offline we were talking about where's the conviction gone? What does that mean? And I know there's many different strains that we could look at this, but initially we're going to start with, I guess, professionally, right? So in the past, maybe when you were growing up, or certainly when I was growing up, would it be right to say there was a lot more conviction in terms of people and how they held true to their values, regardless of kind of the industry that they were working in, whether it was law, whether it was, telecommunications, whatever it was? Do you feel, looking back, that there was maybe more conviction in terms of people holding true to their values?
I do. And I don't know if it's, good old time or, old time syndrome. Everyone was more convicted then and followed through with whether it was professionally, in their life, etc. But I wonder, I think we don't have that level of conviction anymore for the most part. I don't know if it's because things are easier, and maybe in the past, things were a little bit more difficult. So people would stand up and would have more a conviction because they were already knowing the tough road they would have to hoe. And things maybe now are easier, and we have built-in excuses, or at least that's the way I see it sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. It's particularly around excuses. There's a you can speak to anybody, not anybody, but you can speak to somebody now and they've said, right, so this year I'm going to run 10K every day for a whole 12 months, right? And there will be people that for one reason or another naturally have to fall out, whether that's due to injury or whatever it would be. But there will also be a small selection of people who will find an excuse not to be able to run that or to meet their convictions. And I know, running a 10K every day is a big conviction. It's a big achievement. It's a big ambition. But I think there is some truth in terms of how people nowadays may not be as convicted as they may have been in the past to achieve their goals. And I wonder if that's why we're seeing more of these mentors, these personal development people who come out now and say, look, you have to follow this, but not you have to follow this plan, but they give people habits of the mornings to follow to make sure they achieve your goals. Do you think that's a symptom of kind of trying to get back to achieving or increasing the level of conviction? Do you think that's helping? That's a hindrance? What are your thoughts on that, mate?
I think that's a great point. There is a rise in those type of people to motivate others, to provide guidance. The thing you just said, the 5 steps you need to do each morning.
Right.
The things you need to do in the evening, how to be more productive in the workplace. These are the times you don't check these are the times you do check your email. These are the times you don't, so that way you can be more productive. But I think you're correct. I think it's wonderful that these type of people exist and provide those type of assistance. But I think, to your point, it's more of a commentary on the fact that we don't probably have the level of conviction that we need, whether it's, like you said, running a 10K every day or, just other type of habits And that's why, obviously, we're here at the first of the year. It's notorious for everyone to make their New Year's resolution and how they're going to do it. And the attrition rate of, the follow through is pretty laxed, pretty bad.
Exactly right.
By about mid-February, all of it's out the window. But to your point, yeah, I think we're seeing that level of more of self-help and all that, because I think people do lack the conviction on their own to follow through with things.
And I think, to your point as well, that the distractions nowadays are so much more than we had. When I was growing up, I had maybe 3 or 4 TV channels, certainly no internet. So yeah, and mobile phones, never even heard of it, right, when I was growing up. So the distractions nowadays are certainly probably 10, if not 20-fold than they were in the past. Maybe focusing in a little bit more on your area of expertise. Where's conviction? Do you see conviction waning a little bit now in the law field? And is that as a result of what we've been speaking about, or is there something else that may be driving that?
What's interesting from a legal perspective, and like we've talked about before, my whole area has been what they call in-house counsel.
Yes, yeah.
So different than a lawyer at a law firm. What I've noticed, and what has grown really prevalent, and it really started around the time that I was at both Huawei and ZTE, again, Chinese telecom companies. They didn't have this, but the level of what we call head of compliance. So it might be your general counsel who is your head of compliance, or there is just a compliance department. And their job is to make sure that you're following all the different rules that are out there. We have so many regulations and things, and they vary by industry, right? So whatever your company is, there's a whole slew of rules, regulations, general compliance, whether you're a privately traded company, whether you're a publicly traded, whether you're a private company. There are all kinds of different rules and regulations. And my whole point to this was having a compliance department keeps attorneys, especially general counsels, more on their toes. Mm-hmm. And it keeps CEOs more enlightened. And so I think that is a big player. Compliance has grown huge. And there are CLEs, continuing legal education courses, and people become basically certified to be a compliance officer. And taking your point that you made earlier about all these kind of self-help people, that industry has grown. Right. That's really what a compliance person is making sure that you stay in line with all the different rules based on your industry. So to answer your question, I think from what I've seen in a legal world, the compliance and ethics and things like that are really at the forefront. And I think that's what I've noticed is CEOs or heads of companies really rely on legal and compliance because there are so many pitfalls out there, and things like HR issues or whistleblowing could be an issue. And so they want to cut it off at the pass and make sure that they followed all the rules and regulations for their industry.
I see. So rather than maybe having that leeway that, pre the compliance department, there's not leeway anymore, regardless of which industry you might be in. That compliance department basically says, this is what you can and this is what you can't do. Correct? Is my understanding correct?
Correct. And, compliance departments are, some companies don't even have them, again, based on the size of the company.
Yeah.
Obviously, the larger companies have huge compliance departments, audit departments. So they're always regulating. But yeah, you're exactly right that the growth of that has kept companies on their toes and had made it where I think the legal department relies so much on compliance as well. So it's really grown and taken off, I would say, within the last 10, 15 years. Compliance wasn't even a thing, really.
No, my background is contact centers, and it was only probably about 10, 15 years ago when I started to hear about a compliance center within the contact center. And it was driven because of, in the UK, FSA, which is the Financial Services Authority. If any contact center had a financial services account, it wasn't scripted word for word, but there were certainly mandatory things you had to say on every call. There was a process to follow if somebody didn't perform a call in a certain way. And even before you could take a call, you had to go through a certain level of checks to make sure that you were deemed credit worthy to be on those type of accounts. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Cool. I like that. I like the thought of compliance. To a certain extent, I've got my own thoughts in terms of, from a contact center world, whether or not it does detract from a person being a person, whether they get concerned over, I have to say this, I have to say that. That's a conversation for a completely different day. But I guess from your stance, do you think compliance, is it a good, is it a bad thing? Is there pros and cons? How does it work?
Sure, there's pros and cons. I think for the most part, it's a good thing. People, especially here in the U.S., we're quite litigious, right? We're quite litigious, and companies are concerned about that, whether it's an HR issue, whether harassment, any type of thing like that. So companies are really concerned about that, as well as making sure they're following, like a compliance department, following all the rules. If you're a publicly traded company, you have to do your quarterly filings. And so any type of thing that they can do to show that they're compliant with whatever the rules or laws are, I think is a good thing. There's a lot more transparency, and I think that's big and important. And so, for the most part, I think it's good. Can it be a bog down, a beat down when you have so many rules and regulations or a compliance department to follow? I think it can be. But when you weigh it, when you look at the pros and the cons, which would you rather have? I think it kind of goes without saying, we're better off when we have compliance and a compliance department in general.
I agree with you. That said, do you think there's a risk from a COO perspective or an owner of a company where they go, right, I've got 100 staff, regardless of the industry, whether that's law, telecoms, whatever it may be, contact centers. I've got 100 staff. I've got a compliance department. I'm good. I don't need to worry. Do you think there is that complacency, or are the good COOs they check in with the compliance department? How do you think it works, or how does it work?
I think that's a great point. You bring up a great point. It's almost like, hey, I have the compliance department. I have this person. I do that. They do this. Like you said, check the box. I'm all done. The good CEOs that I've seen are constantly checking in. They're constantly asking. They ask questions, and that's what I think is really important. They're asking and wanting to know why, or what are we doing about this? And they're always a step ahead. And I've been really fortunate with several of the CEOs that I've worked for. They work harder than anyone else. And when you have a CEO that's working that hard and is following the rules, obviously, but is interested in asking questions. So obviously they're going to ask questions from a compliance perspective. But when I was general counsel and we had litigation or we were having a contracts process, they were always asking questions. And I love that. And the good CEOs are on top of it, like you said. And I haven't seen that many who kind of, put their feet up and their hands behind their head saying, okay, my work here is done. I haven't seen that. I've been fortunate to work with some good ones.
It's like you were saying, the New Year's analogy, New Year resolution analogy, right? You go, right, 1st of January, I've been to the gym once, I'm done now. I'm good for the whole year, right? I don't have to go again. It's consistency is the key, right? Consistency.
Absolutely. And a good CEO. I had a weekly meeting every week with my CEO to update him on everything that was going on in the legal department. And he would also do the same thing with the compliance group, as well as the head of HR. So to your point, it's consistency. It's not, let's have that one meeting this year and we're done till next year.
See you next year. It's a check-in. It's a tick in the box.
It's a consistent thing to stay on top of it.
I guess one of my final questions is, whose responsibility is it to make sure that the operations are up to date with the most current procedures, processes, compliance? Is it the compliance department? Is it the compliance manager, the compliance officer, or is it department heads? You know, whether that's operations or training or whatever it may be, or is it an amalgamation? How does that work? You know, in the top companies, how does that work? What's the best thing that you've seen?
Well, that's a very good question. And again, I hate to say this, but it varies. But to the largest companies, I think the largest do a good job of a little bit of everyone pitching in. Is compliance going to make sure we're following all the rules and regulations for our industry? Certainly, that's their job. When I've seen the top salespeople, they're always, or the head of sales, for instance.
Yes.
They're always looking at how can we do our process better, whether they're getting contracts in place. Do we have a contract management system? And again, I've worked a lot with the heads of sales in doing that. So it's everyone kind of pitching in. And to your point, a good CEO is kind of looking down from more of a 30,000-foot view and saying, hey, we do need to get compliance here. And hey, sales, are we using the best system we can? Is there a better system? And hey, legal, how are we tracking all these agreements? How are we keeping them? Are we managing them? Is there a repository for them? Who has access to them? So it's a little bit of everyone. And I like I said, a good CEO is having a 30,000-foot view and making sure that getting input from everyone. So it's the best systems that can be in place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question from my experience as I was growing up, right? So I cut my teeth in cold calling. Just to tell you how old I am, from a Dun & Bradstreet, even before there was dialers out there, manual dialing, right? There was no CRM or anything like that. And it was always a case of, look, this is the line. This is the compliance line. You get as close to that line as possible without bending it. And if you need to bend it, that's fine, but you make sure you get the sale. What I'm getting from you now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that's not the case anymore. Sales departments are crystal clear on what the compliances are. And in fact, they don't get too close to that line where they could get either themselves or the company in trouble. Is that the case, or am I misunderstanding?
You're spot on. I have worked with salespeople that end of quarter, and they need to get their sales in, which I'm sure you've experienced that
absolutely.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
They get real flexible with their. But it's funny. What's funny is, take for instance, and I just did this with a company recently. It was their end of quarter. And I was assisting with all their sales contracts, right? Okay. So we had to get all those sales contracts in, and a good head of sales. Well, we'd have his weekly call, and he invited me to be on the calls, and I thought, well, that's kind of strange. Why would he want legal to be on the call? But after a few times of sitting in, it started to make sense. And he would go around, basically, I say around the room. We were all on a conference call. But he would go around and ask different people where we were at on, say, this deal. Okay, where were we on that? And he was very good at it. But what I found interesting was he knew the contract, our form, our template, and would always ask. And this is why I realized why I was on the call. He would say, okay, salesperson, where are we on, company X, and where are they in the pipeline of getting this deal done? Yeah. And I'm getting to the point. And the point was the person would say, well, I'm waiting for legal. Legal has some red lines that they won't approve. And so then it begs the question. Then the head of sales turns to me basically and says, what's the holdup on this one, Ashley? Why can't we bend on this? Why can't we agree to this? And so they're savvy, right? But they want to get the deal done. But to your point, it is kind of a bend, don't break. And I have had heads of sales actually say, we just won't do that. We'll let the deal go. It might make our quarter if we closed it, but that's just wrong, and we don't agree to those type of changes to our terms.
I think I know we've had a good laugh and a joke, but there is some very salient points that you're making there, particularly from a consumer perspective. Whereas now, look, businesses have checks and balances in place, the compliance department, to make sure that, and unfortunately, you're always going to get those unscrupulous companies out there that, as you were saying, don't have a compliance department, don't have values, and they're all after the number. But majority of cases, they've got the compliance department, they're sticking to the rules, they're protecting not only themselves but also the consumer. And for me, as a consumer myself, I think that's a huge step in the right direction, right? That just gives me confidence whenever I speak to any type of company, to be fair.
Yeah, for sure. I know we called this this episode, where has conviction gone? From a business perspective, I've noticed for the companies that I've worked for, conviction is strong in the sense that compliance departments, legal, HR, everyone, a good CEO knows what the rules are, and they follow it. And so there really is taking a lot of the guesswork out. So maybe conviction is left in other areas of our life, but from my perspective, in a corporate environment, especially the larger ones, compliance conviction is probably stronger than it's ever been.
I think you're right. I was thinking that myself when we were going through the interview, that it's not necessarily where has conviction gone. It's more of a case of, has conviction come back into the industry, into the workforce to protect people, right? And I think we've discovered that it has, yes. That you're not always going to get the people who are going to commit to going to the gym every day, but from a professional standpoint, there's these rules and checks and balances in place to make sure that me as an employee is protected, the company's protected, but also the consumer and protected as well. And I think that's a great story to share. Ashley, as always, it's never a chore. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I wish we could do it more often. Before we end the podcast, my friend, where can people reach out to you?
Yeah, you can always come to my website, which is ashleyyablon.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram.
Excellent. Ashley, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today. Audience members, thank you so much for the love and support. We really, really appreciate it. We obviously do have a podcast. You listen to it now, but also Ashley has a YouTube channel that is setting the YouTube world on fire. So if you get an opportunity, please tune into, and you can see, well, I'd say Ashley's beautiful face, not so much mine. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Take care, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Truth Champion Podcast with Ashley Yablon. To find out more, please visit www.ashleyyablon.com or follow Ashley on social media. Let us know what you thought of today's podcast or suggest topics you'd like Ashley to cover in the future.